Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the JANUS Contemporaries lineup, which is associated with the Criterion channel. So, as we know, starting from last year, there is this new lineup of Blu-rays of contemporary releases, that is films that are circa 2022, 2023, and this year 2024. And so this JANUS Contemporaries lineup continues very strongly this year with respect to its 2024 releases, and I have one that I'd like to speak about today, and this is a JANUS Contemporaries release of a film, of a work which is described as being from the year 2023, and the name of the filmmaker is Wim Wenders, and the name of the work is ANSELM. This is a very fascinating film. I was so taken with this film, this work, which is described as being from the year 2023, and this is from the filmmaker, artist, documentarian Wim Wenders, and it is focusing in. It is this work, which is ANSELM, and it is focusing in on the artist, who is ANSELM Kiefer. And the way in which this film focuses in on ANSELM Kiefer and his art and his life and his outlook on his philosophical outlook on life and art and aspects of his childhood, and the engagement with and the actual text, the texturals, and the tactile nature of his artworks, his studio, and the way in which his studio is like, as Wim Wenders I think expresses it in one of the supplements, it's like an extension of his brain. It's a fascinating portrait, a biographical portrait. In that way, too, it's described as a documentary, and because it's capturing the essence of a real life figure. And presenting it in a way, but presenting it in using a type of film language or film grammar that is very enticing, very enveloping, and quite, it enables a type of deep dive, an actual feeling of being propelling forward, deep diving into the world of the film itself. And I'll get to a little bit of that in a moment. But ANSELM, this work is, or this JANUS Contemporaries Blu-ray, or it's a 2-disc Blu-ray. There's a 3D Blu-ray, and then there's a quote-unquote standard Blu-ray. And I'll get to the difference or my subjective take on the difference in formats in a moment. But this was the first time that I'd seen this work, ANSELM. I'd seen a number of Wim Wenders films, many of which, for instance, can be found quite readily available, for instance, in the Criterion Collection. And indeed, this type of portrait documentary, which I think is very maybe an apropos way of describing it. The portrait documentary, which can be found here, I think there can be some comparison made to another work, for instance, that Wim Wenders did, which also is found in the Criterion Collection, which is called Pina, which is focusing in on Pina Bosch, but and has a similar kind of structure in terms of, I mean, it's the ultimate. It's the ultimate type of expression of show, not tell, in a way. In other words, not only providing the context of the artist and the artwork, but actually providing the film grammar to actually see the artwork almost being replicated or being examined before our very eyes by Wim Wenders and the camera itself. So it's a kind of fascinating Wim Wenders approach to the documentary or the portrait work. And so ANSELM, I think, fits into that category very nicely, very concretely. and it has, I think, many facets and contours to it. So we see the artist Anselm Kiefer himself engaged in, for instance, many aspects of creating or engaging with maybe installations or artworks and pieces that are also on display even through the opening passages of the film in very lyrical and wonderful gliding camera motions and movements. And so we see the works on the display themselves. We also see the artist in action, as the saying goes, perhaps weaving in and out with his bicycle through the large expanse of the studio. Or seeing certain creation, maybe engagement with a work in progress, as it were. There's a moment where we see him writing on the wall of some corner or some top part of the wall, the unbearable lightness of being, as an example. So we also see aspects of his life told maybe not necessarily in a sort of straight linear chronological fashion from A to B to C to D, sort of cataloging his life in years, progressing forward in that manner, but rather telling it in a way that I think has a sense of a kind of ephemeral beauty on the one hand, and also a type of mysterious quality, and also I think a direct, true to form type of immediacy. And here we have what might be described as, I don't know if I don't know if the word reenactment is the proper is the proper what do you call it? It's the proper description for it, but I think one could call it, say, using actors or using actual people that are relevant and related to Anselm Kiefer himself, such as his son, and using them to stand in for certain passages that are meant to represent various chapters of Anselm Kiefer's own life. For instance, in the development of or the inspiration of certain works of art, or perhaps even to the childlike experience by the river Rhine, and the Castle Favorite, as it's mentioned in one of the supplements. Not just sitting on the steps doing work, but also being able to walk through the passages of the castle itself, and meant to be emblematic or reminiscent of a type of biographical, the essence of the biographical representation, but doing it in a way that is very lyrical, and it has a type of musical passage or art installation, a passage type of quality, while still being very, I think, easy to access and easy to understand. So it's we are learning by being immersed, in a manner of speaking, and not only do you get aspects of the biographical details in this, I think, very creative way, but we also see how we have various examples of how Anselm Kiefer, as the artist, has been very provocative and has engaged directly with, say, certain texts of poetry or certain, say, events of history in a number of the the works that he is known for. You know, I'm not a student of art and art history, and so I'm in no way an expert when it comes to the life and work of Anselm Kiefer, but I know very, very little, or I've heard, and my knowledge base is incredibly limited and narrow and very shallow. But this was a very fascinating opportunity for me to learn a little bit more based off of what I had known of, and again, my experience was admittedly very shallow, and it is now. But even so, the film was not just a jumping off point for someone in my position to want to explore more of his life and times and works, but also to be enveloped in it and feel like I was seeing the creative process in action in these, again, retellings or wonderful types of cinematic, say, cinematic embodiments, if you will, of the recreation of, or the creation of certain works of art here and there, and also how the engagement with, say, poetry and text, how that too is a very immersive process. And so we see, we're reminded of the close connection in terms of ANSELM Kiefer's work and philosophy with Ingeborg Bachmann and Paul Celan and others. We actually see, excuse me, we actually see the text come to life in this really fascinating way, almost jump off the pages, or in fact the pages themselves are revealing the life that the words already held it within them. It's just a matter then of seeing how ANSELM Kiefer, the artist, has engaged with them, and also not shying away from very difficult moments of history, European history, German history, and the sort of immediacy of German history and World War II and the Holocaust and other points of the historical context, maybe vis-a-vis specific works that are referenced directly in this work, ANSELM. And also we see how maybe some examples are taken in terms of how those works and the creative processes that could be said to be very much part of ANSELM Kiefer's philosophy behind those works. So it's a very rich portrait, a documentary portrait, as created by Wim Wenders. It's a really beautifully created work indeed. And now I must go to the way in which it was made, and perhaps this might be my way of talking about how this film, ANSELM, the Wim Wenders film, is being presented here. So let me just go straight into this, because it's very much part of the film and the engagement that I had with the film. So this is the 2-disc JANUS Contemporaries release, and it's described as a Blu-ray, it's a Blu-ray 3D or 3D Blu-ray and a Blu-ray. So there's a Blu-ray and then there's a Blu-ray 3D, and it's 93 minutes, black and white and color, 5.1 surround in German and English with English subtitles, 1.5 to 1 aspect ratio, and this is again, according to the back, shot in 6K resolution and presented theatrically and on Blu-ray in 3D. So this has a, well, let me put it this way. I don't have my personal players, or the monitors that I have in this home don't have 3D capability, unfortunately. And so I had gotten this JANUS Contemporary release of ANSELM actually some months back, so quite a while now. And it was the first time that I had seen the film. I first saw it on the quote-unquote standard Blu-ray, and I could tell immediately that there was a lot happening in terms of depth. There's a lot happening in terms of how foreground and background were almost interacting with each other, and this was shown in, for instance, how the creative process was being depicted on screen in terms of almost recreations of art installations that's done in a very creative way. Sometimes you have overlapping images against an environment or screen, and so you can tell immediately, even in the quote-unquote standard Blu-ray experience, that you have this type of kind of almost an interactive, immersive experience by the very nature of how Wim Wenders created it and shot it. But I was never able to see it in 3D. I'd never been able to see it shown in that way. So it was quite difficult. So I didn't know quite what to do. But it so happened that I was able, by sheer luck, to be able to catch this a little bit later. Quite recently, I was able to watch this in the 3D format experience. I was only able to see it once in the 3D format experience, but I was very lucky to do so. So I was actually, before that opportunity presented itself to me, I was actually just preparing, in fact, to talk about this film in this video format based upon my experience with the quote-unquote standard Blu-ray experience, which was immense, immersive, and very, very beautiful. So I was very taken, and so Please, before I go any further, I want to really emphasize how much the Blu-ray experience and watching it on a modern, even if it's not equipped with 3D capability, like my home monitors and players are here in this house. It is a very immersive experience, so beautiful. Even the shots of, say, the child walking down a kind of corridor of trees, for example, you have the sense of depth, and you're almost not falling into the film, but just going into the flow of it. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's a really wonderful, enriching experience, but when I was able to see it in 3D for the first and only time, um, it became a kind of it was a it was very eye opening, and this type of immersion, a sense of being immersed, really came through. And I think it was like I was being invited by Wim Wenders and ANSELM and company to fall into the world of the film and almost be be able to touch the creative process as it was unfolding before me. It had that type of immersive experience. I mean, I'm personally, I must say that I'm not always my mind and my eyes and ears don't always get fully attuned when I see a work that is, say, in 3D. Sometimes I might feel a little bit dizzy, or might it might be a little bit difficult for me just to try to my eyes to get used to things, etc. So um, I don't always watch films in 3D if they're offered in the 3D format. If I can, I try, but usually when a film is um, made in both a 3D version and a quote unquote standard non 3D version, I'll probably more often than not. Uh, I've seen the non 3D version more often than I will see the 3D version of the same film, and so the same is true for ANSELM. So I've seen the non 3D version the most now, but I must say I was incredibly impressed. I was incredibly impressed with this. So, as a 3D experience, again, almost being able to touch the creative process before my very eyes. So, this is my strong desire for anyone who's able to watch this film in the 3D experience. I cannot stress enough just how much I was so taken with the film already, but then to be able to experience it in the 3D fashion. Now it makes me try to wonder how I might be able to reconfigure my home viewing setup to be able to cater to the 3D Blu-ray experience now at home. I don't know if I have to probably think about a player and maybe saving up money for consideration of the equipment, but that might be involved. I don't know if it's that. I don't know if it's that totally beyond my reach at the moment, but still, it takes some preparation. That being said, um, if you have the opportunity to watch this in 3D, I think it is totally worth it. If you watch it on the Blu-ray experience, it is still totally worth it. It is so totally worth it. Again, from my perspective who knew little, if anything, about Anselm Kiefer, I look at this work and I see it as a jumping off point for trying to know more about, say, the specifics of his biographical details in his life. And if I'm looking for a quote unquote traditional biography, um, I might need to look elsewhere. I mean, it doesn't present this world and the facts in that way. This film does. It doesn't present it in that way. So if I'm looking for a traditional biography, end quote, I will probably look elsewhere. But that doesn't at all diminish its power. It doesn't at all take away the power that is this film on sound. Again, um, it is breathtaking. And the sort of composition of style and also the music too, and we'll get to a little bit of it, excuse me, where I'm so excited, I'm just dropping things left and right. I apologize, but I can't control my excitement, I suppose. But my point is that um, if you watch this in terms of the home movie Blu-ray experience, you're going to get so much out of it. um, really are. And it's another work by Wim Wenders in the sort of Criterion Collection / JANUS Contemporaries lineup, which is really, really welcome indeed. So this is the work which is ANSELM. And so now I have the Blu-ray, the quote-unquote standard Blu-ray in the machine behind me. I should point out that it's a two-disc set, so since I have the standard Blu-ray, what remains in the case is the Blu-ray 3D disc, which actually you can still, I mean, I can still play it on my quote-unquote standard Blu-ray player behind me. It just projects the work as a I mean a flat non 3D experience, but at least on the player that I have, because I don't have 3D equipment, quick machinery here, unfortunately. But let me rely on the Blu-ray disc, which is what I have here in the machine. It's a really lovely menu, image, ANSELM, and you have an image of the artist standing there in this great posture. We have the options here of play the movie, meet the filmmakers, trailer, and subtitles on and off. So meet the filmmakers. Let me talk about this component here. Meet the filmmakers, excuse me. Gosh, I've dropped my notebook here, but let me pick up my notebook here. Meet the filmmakers is the, where did I put it? Here it is. Sorry about this. This is a part of, I understand, the series, which is, I think, on the Criterion channel, the Criterion Collection streaming service. Um, and of course, this is an opportunity, as per these JANUS Contemporaries Blu-ray releases, to have an introduction or a one-on-one interview with the filmmakers themselves. And so we have Wim Wenders introducing himself. He introduces his name. He's Wim Wenders. He is a filmmaker. He makes drama films and also documentaries. And here you have a brief discussion. It's approximately 16 minutes, one-on-one with Wim Wenders. This is really great. It's always great to have the opportunity to hear from Wim Wenders himself in this manner. So, very eloquent. He's got this great style. I love his glasses, by the way. You know, we saw those also. The one he wore, I think, in in the interviews that we saw with him in another Wim Wenders directed film that's also in the Criterion Collection, called Perfect Days. But here he talks about one of his style kinds of works that he does, or one of the kinds of films that he does, this type of portrait documentary uh, work. So I mentioned he did works, for instance, about Salgado, for example, Pina Bosch, for instance, the work Pina. You can also find in a great physical media release from several years back, and that's from, I think it was 2011, if I'm not mistaken, the work. And then so this following in those footsteps, in a manner of speaking, in terms of Wim Wenders, one of the types of films that he does is ANSELM, and so this, according to me, has a kind of long history. He describes first meeting ANSELM Kiefer, uh, as he describes it, circa 1991, around the time that Wim Wenders was editing the film Until the End of the World. And he mentions going to the same restaurant in the vicinity. And by chance, he met Anselm Kiefer and became acquainted with him because they went to the same restaurant. As Wim Wenders mentions, he is a creature of habit, and so he tended to go to the same place many times, and so they became acquainted, and so I think they became very close indeed. You know, I think there's an indication that there's a kind of kindred spirit operating there. Among other things, Wim Wenders mentions in this interview how he always aspired. He had aspirations to be a painter. He did not become a painter. He became a filmmaker. And that's how he describes it. But he always wanted to be a painter, and he had the artist sentiment about him. And so I think that's one of the reasons that he cites, that he had a real feeling of a closeness with Anselm Kiefer. And then they didn't meet again for some time until much later, around 2019, according to Wim Wenders. This is maybe summer 2019. I think prior to the outbreak of the pandemic, but. Anselm Kiefer invited Wim Wenders to visit him in France, according to Wim Wenders, and so this is the opportunity for him to visit the grounds of the studio, as it were, and almost he said he was given a map of the grounds and he could explore the various installations and works at his own pace, which Wim Wenders really admired very much. And so this formed the initiative, I think, on the part of Wim Wenders and Anselm Kiefer to work together. And the end result is, again, released in 2023, ANSELM. And so for here, Wim Wenders, he expresses how he wanted to capture, I think, the creative process, the actual act of creating. And one can do that in many forms, but Wim Wenders and company chooses it in this, I think, very wonderfully. I mean, the style of this work on some is quite visually arresting, very moving, and so very lovely indeed. He talks to you a little bit about shooting it in sort of 6 or 7 installments, and with a little bit of space in between each installment. So he mentions it in that way. And then I think too, he talks to you about wanting to engage with the 3D format, because among other things, he says that it's an interesting way in which he can somehow or another maybe tackle or otherwise engage with the concept of time. And I never thought of 3D and time or temporal quality of 3D before, but there's a type of elongation that's happening. There's also a type of when one is immersed, there is also the feeling of being able to keep track of a type of progress, in a manner of speaking. So there is a sense of a progression forward, while also being able to hold still in a captured, frozen moment in time. So it's a kind of a two-pronged effect, if you will, at least I think, in the context of 3D and time. I never thought about it before, but my goodness, you learn something new every day, don't you? And I certainly did this and many other points. And it was also important to see, as he mentions, engagement with a certain text. The words of Bachmann and Celan mentioned, Paul Celan mentioned, Ingeborg Bachmann are mentioned as examples, and so this was very important indeed. He mentions, for instance, Celan's and the use of the language in some of the musical passages that were created for the work ANSELM. So I didn't know that either, but that also is a really great detail. And two, talking about the various ways in which Wim Wenders chose to, for instance, engage with the son of Anselm Kiefer in some of the key sequences in the film, but he wanted to, and Anselm Kiefer also insisted on not knowing too much about what Wim Wenders was going to do. And so there's an interesting anecdote about how this part of the film was, in a sense, kept secret from Anselm Kiefer, not for any devious purposes, but basically to retain the surprise. Anselm Kiefer insisted on giving Wim Wenders enough room to choose his own path for telling this story, and not having any direct input or orders or instructions from Anselm Kiefer, but rather having the artist himself be surprised when the final film by Wim Wenders come out. And so I think this sequence involving his son was an example of that. And also there's a lovely way in which Wim Wenders connects his own life with that of Anselm Kiefer in terms of the vicinity, the closeness in which they grew up, according to Wim Wenders, a distance of some hundreds of miles, but still united by the River Rhine. And so there are some childhood memories that are expressed in terms of Anselm Kiefer's own childhood memories in the River Rhine, and also Wim Wenders talks about how he also had his own similar childhood memories with said river. So it's a lovely moment. And of course, it's also mentioned. I mentioned Anselm Kiefer's son and the episode involving Oldenwald and other episodes in the film. So 16 minutes. I could watch a Wim Wenders talk for minutes, hours, days. I'd love to hear him speak, and I love to hear him talk in this great way about his work, and he does so here with great down-to-earth quality, a very calmness in his voice. Just listening to him speak, it's so calming and soothing. Highly recommended if you can. So that's the 16-minute or so Meet the Filmmakers section on Wim Wenders, where he talks about the work ANSELM. And then there's the trailer, which is the second or the third element here. So that is the what that can be found on the disc, and that I think is also that that is true for the 3D Blu-ray disc as well as the Blu-ray disc. So there's that, and then I should say too that we have the insert, which is a twofold insert, which has the writing by Michael Joshua Rowan, ANSELM Wide Canvas. And this is also a great jumping off point. The essay is with regard to the work ANSELM, the life and times of ANSELM Kiefer, and also Wim Wenders, and great information. So this is, yes, the JANUS Contemporaries release of ANSELM, the Wim Wenders film from 2023. So I've been, for reasons that I was mentioning earlier in the discussion, I was kind of sitting on this video discussion here on YouTube for a while now, but it's been always there, and I've seen it now a number of times since I first got this Blu-ray release. But I hadn't seen it prior to the Blu-ray release. But now that I have seen it, and seen it a number of times now, and also very fortunately being able to see it once in 3D, I must say that I am incredibly taken with it. And I'm not an expert in the world of art and art history and ANSELM Kiefer and his works, but I feel like I was given the opportunity to become totally immersed, even if but for a moment, totally immersed in a way that is has to be seen and experienced to be believed. I think it's really that much of a potentially moving experience. So really wonderful indeed. This is the Wim Wenders film, which is ANSELM. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great works, including other films by Wim Wenders, including other works in the JANUS Contemporaries lineup, including other films in the Criterion Collection and beyond. So until we see each other again, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.